Chapter 4 of The Magic Nuts by Mary Louisa Molesworth. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Anne Fletcher. Chapter 4 On the Way. Oh, what is that country, and where can it be? Rossetti. If Fraulein heard what Leonore said, she did not seem surprised, for though she did not, of course, know about the little girl's curious dream, she knew that Hildegard's coming had been freely talked about the evening before. But she was very astonished a moment later when Hildegard, looking up quietly, said with a smile, "I've come to meet you. I was sure I should." "My dear child," exclaimed Fraulein, "how could you know? The fairies must have told you." The little stranger smiled again. "This is Leonore," she said, taking the other child's hand. "Grandmamma told me her name, but Grandmamma did not know I should meet you." And she shook her head with a funny little air of mystery. "It is wonderful," said Fraulein. "It is even wonderful that you should know me again. It is 5 years, 5 years since you saw me last, half of your life." "Yes," said Hildegard, "but I can remember longer ago than that." She was still holding Leonore's hand, and though the little English girl felt rather shy and had not yet spoken to her new friend, yet she liked the touch of the gentle fingers and pressed them in return, while she looked at Hildegard's pretty fair face in admiration. "I am coming soon to see Aunt Anna," Hildegard went on. "Will you give her my love, Fraulein Elsa, and tell her so? May I come this afternoon?" "Oh, certainly, certainly," said Fraulein. "The sooner you and Leonore make friends, the better pleased we shall all be." At this Leonore took courage. "Oh, yes," she said, looking earnestly at Hildegard with her serious dark eyes. "I want very much to be friends." "It will not take long," said Hildegard, and then, for the first time, Leonore noticed that the little girl's eyes were not like any she had ever seen before. They were not blue, as one would have expected from her light, almost flaxen hair and fair complexion, but a kind of bright hazel brown, with lovely flashes, almost as it were of sunshine, coming and going. "They're golden eyes," thought Leonore, and when she repeated this to Fraulein afterwards, her governess agreed with her that she was right. "I remember noticing their colour when she was a very tiny child," said Fraulein, thinking to herself that the two little girls made a pretty contrast, for Leonore's hair was dark as well as her eyes. Hildegard held up her face for Fraulein to kiss, and then she ran off again, saying as she did so, "Do not forget to tell Aunt Anna I'm coming, and perhaps she will make some of those dear little round cakes I love so. She knows which they are. Leonore will like them too, I'm sure." The day was getting on by this time. It was past noon. "We will just stroll to the other end of the village," said Fraulein, "and from there we shall have the side view of the castle. There is a short cut down to the street at that end by some steps, but they are rough and in need of repair, so we generally prefer the longer way. The old Baron has spoken of shutting off the side entrance. He says it is only fit for goats to scramble up." Leonore thought, though she did not say so, that it would be very amusing for little girls all the same, and determined to ask Hildegard about it. She thought the castle even more interesting seen sideways than in front. It looked so very close to the thick dark trees behind, almost as if it touched them. "I shall have lots of things to talk to Hildegard about," she said to herself. "These woods are very fairy-looking, and I think I must tell her my strange dream about her and the nuts. I don't think she'd laugh at it. Oh, I hope I have them quite safe." Yes, they lay snugly in her pocket, wrapped up in the piece of paper, a nice piece of pink paper that she had found among her things. "I will leave them where they are," she thought, "and then I shall be sure to remember to tell Hildegard my dream." It was nearly dinner-time when they got back to Aunt Anna's, for in that part of the world big people as well as little dine in the middle of the day. Aunt Anna was most interested in hearing of Hildegard's arrival, and quite as delighted as Fraulein had been. "And was it not strange that she should have come to meet us?" said Fraulein. "She must have had a presentiment about it." "What is a presentiment?" asked Leonore. "A sort of knowing beforehand about something that's going to happen," answered Fraulein. "Many people have the feeling, but very often it does not come true, and then it is not a real presentiment. It is not everybody that has real presentiments." Aunt Anna smiled. Leonore was learning to love her smiles. They reminded her of some other smile. Whose was it? Hildegard's? Yes, a little, perhaps. But no, she'd seen Hildegard for the first time that morning, and this feeling about Aunt Anna's smile had come to her already yesterday. Whose smile could it be? "Hildegard is a dear child," said Aunt Anna, "and perhaps she is one of the few who know more than the everyday people. And she was born at the castle and spent her babyhood there. Oh, how well I remember the day she was christened." "Oh, do tell me!" exclaimed Leonore impulsively. "Did they have a grand feast, and did they invite any fairies? Perhaps she had a fairy godmother." "Oh, Leonore," said Fraulein, beginning to laugh, "you are getting too fanciful. You really—" "Nay, Elsa," interrupted Aunt Anna, "let the child say out what is in her mind. And remember, we are here in our dear country, close on the borders of fairyland." "Oh, yes, Fraulein," Leonore interrupted in her turn. "You said so yourself." "And assuredly," Aunt Anna went on, "if Hildegard has a fairy godmother, she has given her none but good gifts." "You speak as if such things were possible, my dear aunt," said Fraulein. "We must not let Leonore grow too fanciful. I shall have you and her taking flight in an airy chariot drawn by white swans, or something of that kind, some fine day, if I don't take care." "Well, you and Hildegard can come after us in another chariot if we do," said Aunt Anna, laughing. But Leonore remained serious. "Please tell me, Aunt Anna," she said, "as you were at Hildegard's christening, was there anyone there who might have been a fairy?" Aunt Anna hesitated. "There was an odd story," she replied, "about a beautiful lady who was met coming away from the nursery when the baby had been left alone in her cot for a moment or two. And when the nurse went back, she found her smiling and crowing and chuckling to herself as if she was 6 months instead of only a few days old, and in her little hand she was tightly clasping—" "What?" asked Leonore breathlessly. "3 nuts," replied Aunt Anna impressively. "3 common little brown hazelnuts. That part of the story is true, for Hildegard has the nuts to this day, I believe. At least she had them the last time she was here." "Oh, she must have picked them up somehow," said Fraulein. Aunt Anna shook her head. "A baby of a few days old cannot pick things up," she said. "No, it has never been explained. None of the servants had put them into her hand. Indeed, they would not have been so foolish, and they could scarcely have had the chance of doing so. And it was said by the 1 or 2 who declared they had met her that the beautiful lady was carrying a basket on her arm filled with common hazelnuts, and some days afterwards one of the foresters said that late that same evening a little old woman whom he had never seen before stopped him up in the high woods to ask the way to some strange place of which he had never heard, and she, the little old woman, was carrying a basket of nuts. She offered him some, but he thought she was a witch and would not have any." "Oh, dear me, Aunt Hannah," exclaimed her niece, "I did not know all these wonderful tales. Surely they grew out of finding the nuts in the baby's hands. I do remember hearing that, though I had forgotten it." "Perhaps that was the origin of it all," said her aunt quietly. "Still, Hildegarde is an uncommon child. It certainly seems as if she had received some fairy gifts, however they came to her." Leonore did not speak, but she listened intently. She would probably have not contented herself with listening but for knowing that she was so soon to see Hildegarde herself again. "She will be the best person to ask," thought Leonore. "I will tell her about my nuts, and the little old woman who gave me them, and about the pretty laugh I heard in the wood, and then I feel sure she'll tell me all she knows." She could scarcely finish her dinner, so eager and excited did she feel, and she was more than delighted when at the close of the meal kind Fraulein proposed to her that as Hildegarde had come to meet them that morning, Leonore should show her new little friend the same attention. "You can scarcely miss her," she said. "She is sure to come the same way that I took you this morning. If you get ready now and start in a quarter of an hour or so, you will be about right, I should say. They dine early at the castle, but I should like you to change your dress in case you should be presented to the Baroness, Hildegarde's grandmamma." Leonore ran off to get ready. She was not long about it, but all the same her new little friend must have been even quicker, for Leonore met her a very few steps only from Aunt Anna's gate. Hildegarde's face lighted up with a smile when she caught sight of the other little girl. "So you have come to meet me," she said. "That's very nice of you. I hope I have not come too soon. Shall I go in now to see Aunt Anna?" Leonore looked a little disappointed, which Hildegarde seemed at once to understand. "I don't mean to stay with Aunt Anna," she added quickly. "What I want is for you and me to go out somewhere together. It's a lovely day, and I have leave to stay out till dusk. My grandmamma is going to pay some visits, so she hopes to see you some other day, perhaps tomorrow. I think we shall get to know each other far the best by being alone by ourselves. Don't you think so?" "Oh, yes, certainly," said Leonore, her face clearing. "I'm so glad you understand. I have such a lot of things to talk to you about." Hildegarde nodded her head. It was a little habit of hers to do so without speaking sometimes. "Then we must not lose any of our time," she said, after a moment's pause. "But first I will run in to give Aunt Anna a kiss, and then we can go off somewhere together." Aunt Anna's face was full of pleasure at the sight of her little friend. The two were evidently old acquaintances. "How well you are looking, my child," she said, "and how much you have grown. Oh, let me see, which is the taller, you or our little Leonore?" And she drew the two children together. "Oh, there is not a quarter of an inch between you," she exclaimed. "If you were ponies you would be a perfect match, one dark and one fair," she added musingly. "Yes, my dears, you are evidently intended to be friends." "And that is just what we mean to be," said Hildegarde. "May we go now, Aunt Anna? You will not be anxious, even if Leonore does not come home till dark." "Oh, no," said the old lady tranquilly. "I know you are as safe as you can be. You are going to the woods, I suppose?" "I think so," Hildegarde replied. As soon as they found themselves out of doors again, she took Leonore's hand.
"Let us run quickly through the village," she said, "and then when we get inside the castle grounds we can go slowly and talk as we go. Or perhaps we can sit down. It is so mild, and there are lots of cosy places among the trees."
Leonore was quite pleased to do as Hildegard proposed. Indeed, she had a curious feeling that whatever her new little friend wished, she would like. She did not speak much, for it seemed to her as if she were meant in the first place to listen. The woods were very lovely that afternoon. Hildegard led the way round the castle without approaching it quite closely, till they stood in a little clearing, from which they looked upwards into the row of pine trees, through which, here and there, the afternoon sunshine made streaks of light and brightness. "Isn't it pretty here?" said Hildegard.
"Hush! There's a squirrel."
"There are lots about here. They're so tame they like to be near the house, I think. Shall we sit down? It's quite dry." Leonore was not troubled with any fears of catching cold, and indeed the day was as mild as summer.
"Oh, yes," she said, "it is a very pretty place. I've never seen such big woods before. They go on for miles and miles, up ever so far," said Hildegard, "though here and there the ground is quite flat for a bit. And over there," she pointed to the left, "they are not pine woods, but all sorts of other trees. I don't know which I like best."
"Oh, pine woods, I should say," Leonore replied, "perhaps because I've never seen such beautiful high fir trees before, and the way the sun peeps through them is so pretty." As she spoke, half unconsciously her hand strayed to her jacket pocket. There lay safely the little packet containing the 3 nuts.
"Hildegard," she said, "I heard the story about you when you were a baby, and what they found in your hand, and it is very odd, do you know. Oh, no, of course you couldn't. But just fancy, I have 3 nuts too."
Hildegard nodded her head. "I did know," she said, smiling, "and look here." From the front of her frock she drew out a little green silk bag drawn in at the top with tiny white ribbon. She opened it carefully and took out something which she held towards Leonore. On her pretty pink palm lay 3 nuts, common little brown nuts, just like Leonore's. And Leonore unwrapped her own packet and in the same way held out its contents. "Yes," said Hildegard, "it's all right. I knew you had them." Leonore stared at her in astonishment.
"How could you know?" she exclaimed.
"I suppose people would say I dreamt it," Hildegard replied, "but I don't call it dreaming. I've always known things like that since I was a baby, and I knew that some day I should have a friend like you, and that together we should have lovely adventures, and now it's going to come true." Leonore grew rosy red with excitement.
"Do you mean," she began, "oh, Hildegard, can you mean that perhaps we're going to find the way to Fairyland? I've been thinking about it ever since I can remember anything."
Hildegard nodded. "Yes," she said, "I'm sure you have, but I don't quite know about Fairyland itself. I'm not sure if anyone ever gets quite there, into the very insidest part, you know. I almost think we should have to be turned into fairies for that, and then we could never be little girls again, you see. But I am sure we are going to see some wonderful things. There are the outside parts of Fairyland, you know."
"Fraulein says all this country is on the borders of Fairyland," said Leonore.
"Well, so it is, I dare say, for fairies do come about here sometimes. You've heard the story of the one that came to my christening feast?"
"Oh, yes," said Leonore, "and I'm beginning to think that I've seen her too."
And she went on to tell Hildegard about the little old dame in the market-place at Alt who had given her the nuts, and about the mischievous laugh she had heard in the woods on the way to Dorf,
and all her own thoughts and fancies, including her dream of Hildegard herself. Hildegard listened attentively. "I feel sure you're right," she said, "and that the dame was my own fairy, as I call her. And I believe the laugh you heard in the wood was when you were hoping you hadn't lost the last 3 nuts. I don't believe you could have lost them. If you had thrown them away, they would have come back to you. Just think how my 3 have always been kept safe, even though I was only a tiny baby when they were put into my hand." Both little girls sat silent for a moment or two, gazing at the 6 brown nuts. "And what do you think we're meant to do now?" asked Leonore at last. "To do?" repeated Hildegard in some surprise. "Why, of course it's quite plain. To crack the nuts. Oh, not all of them at once. 1 or perhaps 2. 1 of yours and 1 of mine, I dare say." "Oh!" exclaimed Leonore, "do you really think we should? How I wonder what we shall find. Just supposing there's nothing but a kernel inside." "Oh, there's no good in supposing it," said Hildegard. "We shall soon see. As I have had the nuts the longest, perhaps it's meant for me to crack one first, so—" She put the nut between her teeth. Of course, if it had been a common nut, this would not have been a sensible thing to do, as she would probably have broken her teeth and not cracked the nut. But Hildegard knew what she was about. The nut gave way with a touch, and in another moment the little girl had broken off enough of the shell to see what was inside, Leonore bending over her in breathless eagerness. End of chapter 4.